Okay, today, thank you, Hollie Smurthwaite. Hello.
I
We are talking about, I just finished reading this book and highly encourage everybody to read this book. It is a witchy rom-com. It's unlike anything I have ever read. I was drawn in and sucked it like 2 nights it took me to read this book. One thing that really surprised me was, well, what did it surprise me? Because I'm not typically a slow burn kind of reader. This was a slow burn. They did not do the act until two-thirds of the way into the story, right? Page
Yep.
200 of 300. So I want to talk to you today about how you pulled that off, and because I want to learn, like, mentor me, mentor us in how to write such a sexy slow burn. Um, do you want to just start by saying something? I've got a list of questions, but you can ch chime in.
Okay, I'll dive right into that. So, what was really nice about this story is that it had, for me, like conflict built in, and that they couldn't just have sex, even though they're both attracted to each other because of the issue of consent. Which for me is like a very important thing, and it made it very important to my characters because Cortland is under a spell, like he's like triggered to fulfill the witches. Oh, I should start over to explain the story. So the story is basically it's raining men, except instead of Mother Nature, it's witches who have conjured these perfect guys who they made for themselves as sex slaves. And Sahara's just walking her dog, and her dog darts into this commune, and her dog ends up getting like one of these guys, but she didn't want it. It wasn't anything she uh, actively took a part in, but he's like attached to her. So that setup in itself is real easy for adhesion because he has to be close to her, and set it up so that they could not immediately have sex because he can't consent, right? It's almost like he's like perpetually roofied. So that's sort of how like that I took an exterior component to make it a slow burn. But because they are attracted to each other, I was able to put in sexual moments of attraction, moments of losing it for a few minutes. At one point, they're like, well, how do we work around this? And so there were ways to sort of keep it because I write steamy. So you don't want to have like a steamy book where nothing happens until, you know, two-thirds of the way through, because that's not what the readers want. So I was able to put a little bit of stuff of them struggling in there. And then when they actually give in, then I can go full open door
Yeah,
right on.
sexy, steamy, spicy.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so what techniques did you use to have those almost moments?
In the beginning, I just, because they don't sort of realize what's going on. So there was just like this instant physical attraction. And that's easy enough to write, I think, initial, just purely physical attraction. And then because it's a slow burn, the really nice thing about the whole thing is it's got like a fated mates sort of vibe to it because he was made for her. I mean, that's pretty much essentially what fated mates are. But one thing I don't like about fated mates in general is that I think a lot of times people use it as a shortcut, right? Oh, they're fated mates, so they're just together and we're happy without showing any of the building of the bonding. So because they couldn't have sex, then they bonded over more things other than the physical. So I was able to sort of work that in. And then I sort of look at it from like a teenage boy. I don't know, maybe I'm dating myself, but back when I was like a teenager, like boys wanted sex. And if they couldn't get it, because back then, like good girls don't, and there was all that kind of crap.
Mhm.
But they would get as much as they could. They would find like ways around it. And I kind of implemented a little bit like, okay, we can't have sex, but what if we just kissed, you know?
What
And
if
then
you
what if
just let
we,
me touch your breast? What if, yeah.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So I kind of took it from that perspective and tried to come up with as many, because I didn't want the scenes to be the same. So I had to go like, okay, well, what will they try next? And it's actually kind of fun. And it's a nice challenging writing exercise too. Like, how can you have it be sexual without being the same thing that, we've been reading?
My interpretation of reading it was like they could not have sex until part of the plot was dealt with, right? And you mentioned like he has no autonomy in this relationship. So the consent. Did you know it was going to take that long to get there?
No, because I'm a discovery writer. So just sort of when it came out, I wanted to put it off like as long as possible because once they have sex, it kind of like then it's like, okay, then what next? And I wanted to get them like breaking the spell. But it's also I felt like they had to bond, they had to have an understanding of each other before they could say. So I think it's kind of both a little bit plot based and a little bit character based. I think they
Mhm.
both had to understand the other, where they were coming from, in order for them to be able, for her to be able to say, it's okay. And for him to realize why it hadn't been okay before. So I
Yeah.
think they both had to sort of come together.
I loved so much about how they become friends, how they actually get to know each other so well before they can take that next step. How did you structure the story to ensure that readers stayed invested despite the delayed gratification of the steamy scenes or the no the hmm.
No, I understand what you're saying. For the like the ultimate scene. And I have heard from some people where they're just like, like by the time they have sex, people were ready for it. They were like, come on already. Which I think is funny. And I think that is exactly how I wanted the reader to feel. Because I want in the beginning, because I think a lot of times, especially I think because he was the one under the spell, we sort of forget like he can't consent. Like I could have totally written this story where he's just the perfect guy for her and they have sex right away and whatever. And I think a lot of readers wouldn't even go like, well, that's kind of icky.
Right, right.
Whereas I think in the opposite, if it had been like a female character, then immediately we're like, ooh, I don't know about that. I would have been like, I don't know.
Yeah,
But I wanted to have that in there. So I think there's a really good reason for me for them not to have sex, but they're magically like attracted to each other and they're magically and naturally compatible. And so I think I just trying to find, and the other thing that's fun too is they're trying to break the spell. So the only way they know if they can break the spell is if she gets attracted to him and he can say no. And so there's all those sort of the testing is also a moment of sexual tension and chemistry. So I had breadcrumbed a bunch of those in there to sort of like bring you along. And I'm a discovery writer, so I would write a little bit and then it would be like, ooh, I haven't had any sexual tension in a while. I'm gonna put that in there. You know what I mean? So a lot of that is in revision.
okay. This story is so great, and the reason why I think I read it in 2 nights, and it's a longer book, so I could not have possibly read it in 1 night at my reading speed. But it's that the chapters are brilliant with ending kind of on disaster. It's like things are going well, things are going well, things are going well, explosion. Things are not going well, and then back in again, and then back. That technique is so beautifully done. My experience with this book was I loved how you did that. How, as a discovery writer, did you pull that off?
In revision. So yeah, a lot of times. And one of the things, so the thing I struggled with the most in writing the book was the humor. Like I would write it and then I would be like, ooh, that's not funny enough. And then I would have to go through and add funnier stuff. And one of the funny things, one of the best ways to do humor for me is the irony, right? So you start out the character expecting something and then it either goes the way they think it's going to go and it's not what they wanted, or more often they're like, oh, this is going to be awesome, and then it's not awesome at all, and that's funny. And so I used a lot of that, so that's why there's a lot of like kind of not twists at the end, but that's
Well, they
why
are
things
though.
are,
Yeah, they
are
kind of are twists. Maybe not twists, but definitely unexpected outcomes. How much does the magic or did the magic play into the fact that you could make these unexpected outcomes at the ends of chapters?
think that all the unexpected outcomes almost always have to do with the character and not the magic. Sahara's trying to sort through her life,
Mhm.
and it's not going how she wants it to go, but it's going how she needs it to go, which is, I think, very satisfying.
Yeah. Yeah, it
Because I
really is.
start the story, she's at a low point. Um, and then it actually, I think, gets a little lower for a while. But then and I like that as a reader, because then you know, like, okay, I'm gonna get the bad stuff out of the way, and then things are gonna get better.
Interesting.
Um, yeah, I mean, obviously there have to be setbacks, otherwise it's boring.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's sort of like the trajectory that I like to write.
Yeah, the setbacks in large part were because of all the secondary characters,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
are brilliant, brilliant. I don't want to give any of that away because, but just the most interesting cast of characters one could imagine in a story. So, what inspired you to write a slow burn rather than a quicker physical? Well, they have a quick physical connection. What inspired you to write a slow burn romance?
I didn't set out to do that. I think it's just what the story had to be. Again, I think if they had been able to overcome the consent issue early, that I don't know where else the story would have gone. That's why it happened so late. Um, and it just didn't feel right to me. I felt like they had to get to a point, and you can't rush the character arc. Well, I mean you can, but it's probably not a good idea. So it's just virtue of the story that I was telling that it had happened to be slow burn. I don't normally I don't normally wait that long.
So,
So
but did you not know you were writing a slow burn when
nope.
you really? So even though you had
Nope.
consent as like consent is the theme of the book. Well, and found family and I mean there's a lot of themes.
But
Um and trust in oneself I think is also a pretty dominant theme. Um but
yeah,
so
I didn't know when I started. I was just writing the story.
I love that.
And then after
So
a while I was like, now's the time.
what was the most challenging aspect of, since you are a steamy writer, sitting in that place where you are now writing a slow burn?
It didn't feel bad to me because I got to write sexy moments all along. And sometimes I think that we can like skip too much if we get right to sex. And so there's all that like delicious, gooey chemistry of just of like kissing and wanting more and knowing that you should stop. And then you're like, I should stop in like 30 seconds. Because you know what I mean? And I really enjoy like kind of being in that spot. Again, it kind of actually reminds me of my teenage years too, where you're just like, oh, I should be stopping things, but it feels so good. And then you have to wait until your I don't know, your ego or your super ego just like and scene.
Right.
Stop. Now's the time to stop. I kind of like that. I mean, because all the actual sex stuff is just an extension of the foreplay in a way. In a way, it's all sex, so it's all good. It's just I just delayed the end gratification.
I just read from an expert in sexuality about the fact that for women to really enjoy sex, the average woman needs 30 minutes of foreplay. And she was challenging this idea of calling it foreplay even because it is actually kind of it's part of what we need. So don't suggest that
Right.
it's something external to that. So yeah, your book was kind of like a couple of weeks, 3 or 4 weeks of foreplay, and it works. It works really well. One of the many things I loved was how you normalized sex toys in this book. I mean, maybe there was a little embarrassment when the bag came out the first time, but there was no shame, there was no denial. Um, do you want to talk about that at all?
I think it's like a normal sort of thing. And I think if you can't have sex yourself, and she's got like two jobs, she's really busy. So sex toys like make sense. And I think a lot of people use them. You know, it's just it's and it makes her not different. It's not like it makes her special or anything, but but it is one of the things when you're trying to craft different characters from characters you've done before. I was like, oh, she's just going to be like a person who likes toys. That's just part of the character that I built. I just put that as an aspect of her personality.
Hmm. It worked. It was fun. It was a fun addition to the story. When did you write this first draft of this story?
I want to see it was like 2018 or 2019. It was a long time ago.
It feels so timely politically right now. Like I'm reading it in February 2025, and there's a coven of powerful beings who are controlling the bodies of the other gender, and it really feels like it was written for this time, not 2018. It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I think so. And I also kind of thought when I was writing it, because I don't know if you're like this, when you write it, you kind of think about the implications, like what you're saying, what the characters are thinking. And I have a little bit of this in the book, but I think part of it is that like women have been treated pretty crappy throughout history. So it was like you could make a case that, they're entitled to get their revenge or whatever, but it's still like it doesn't make it right. It's wrong no matter which way you go. But I think sometimes, especially in this climate, people go like, no matter which side you are on the politics, people do this all the time. Some politician will do something really crappy, and people go like, "Oh, well, your guy did this," and it was like, yeah, he was crappy too. They're both crappy. Like one guy's jerkiness doesn't make it okay for somebody else to also be a jerk. And I think we have a lot of that right now, which is very disheartening on
Mm.
both sides.
It felt like it was a timely story. And yes, the main characters are kind. They are demonstrating what it is to make the right choice. Not a selfish decision, a decision that considers the other people, because the secondary characters come in and are very important in the story as well, in the plot and in the relationship development and all of that. So, um, okay, mention one more thing. You mentioned that she goes into this compound with her dog who also gets a man. What?
Yeah. Yeah, and that was one of the very first things, like when I was thinking of the story. And I came up with it, I heard the song on the radio and it's like, oh, this would make such a great story. Except with witches. I had that right away. And almost right away, I also had like the dogs feature heavily in the story. I kind of like the idea where she's not alone because she has her dog, which also anyone who owns a dog knows pets are stressful too. They're great, they're companions and stuff, but you got to feed them, you got to walk them, you got to take them to the vet, you got to do all the stuff. But then I thought it was funny that she would get a companion too. The dog gets a companion. I just thought that was funny.
Okay,
So
it
I
is
put it in
hilarious,
the book.
especially the companion that the dog gets. Desdemona is the dog,
Mhm.
and all of the guys that fall from the sky are hot in whatever way the witches wanted them to be hot. Desdemona's choice of hot is quite interesting. Do you want to talk about how you came up with her perfect mate and why?
Okay, so I think I've had some time to think about it, and I think I have to give the kudos mostly to my subconscious. Um, because I had her perfect guy is just like a pit bull with three legs, and he's dirty, he's got like bit up ears and stuff like that. I think it works on so many levels. I think part of it is just like it's not what's on the outside that counts, it's what's on the inside. And dogs don't care what anyone looks like or whatever. I also like I had written in there, when she like realizes that, this other dog is like their other dog's partner. And she's just like, what were you thinking? Like, you we're all getting from the breeder and she's getting from the pound. And then I thought like probably literally that dog did come from the pound.
Mm,
This was a dog that was like sweet and devoted. I'm gonna get all teary-eyed now
I am
because
too.
yeah,
I am too.
I know because you see that all the time if you watch any of those like videos, which I'm like a sucker for. You get these beat up dogs and they were like the most loving, devoted um animals out there. And I had a pit bull mix once. She was the sweetest dog. And I know a lot of people, even when I would walk her, she's like the friendliest dog, and people would cross the street or whatever. I wanted to say something about what's inside that counts.
He's such a great
Yeah.
dog.
And it's also funny, right? It wouldn't be funny if she'd gotten, well, I guess it could have been funny if she'd gotten like an Afghan.
Yes.
That would have been a different way to go. Then there would have been hair all over the apartment. Yeah, I guess I could have gone the other way, but I wanted to do, I guess I just gravitated toward that extreme. The extreme of like what would be baffling to a person. Like who would want that?
What is the best place to purchase It's Raining Men by Hollie Smurthwaite?
Well, it's in Kindle Unlimited, so if you want the ebook, you have to go to Amazon. Unfortunately, that's the only place to go. And then if you want it in paperback or hardback, you can get it pretty much anywhere. So I have that distributed widely.